When people think of Nazi Germany's Wunderwaffe, the famous wonder weapons, they usually image jet fighters, giant tanks, or secret superweapons that promised miraculous victory. But one of Hitler's most dangerous weapons did not fly, explode, or fire shells. It was money. During World War II, Nazi Germany launched one of the most audacious financial warfare operations in modern history. Operation Bernhard, a vast secret plan to undermine Britain not through bombs but through counterfeit currency. The goal was simple in theory and devastating in practice. Flood Britain with forged Bank of England notes, destroy confidence in the pound sterling, trigger economic chaos, and weaken the British war effort from within. It was financial sabotage on an industrial scale. At its peak, the operation produced between 132 million and 300 million in fake British banknotes, an astronomical sum for the 1940s. To understand why the Nazis chose the British pound, we must first understand what sterling represented in the 1930s and early 1940s. Britain was not only fighting with armies and fleets, it was fighting with finance. London remained one of the world's great financial capitals. The pound sterling was still one of the most trusted reserve currencies on earth. International trade, diplomacy, insurance, shipping, and wartime procurement all depended heavily on confidence in British money. Even though Britain had been weakened by the Great Depression and the cost of rearmament, the pound remained a symbol of stability. Destroy confidence in sterling, and you could shake the foundations of the British war economy. That was the logic. At the start of the war, British paper banknotes were also unusually vulnerable. The famous white notes of the Bank of England had changed little since 1855. They were printed in black ink on one side only, on white cotton rag paper with a small image of Britannia in the corner. Elegant, traditional, but by modern standards dangerously simple. They did contain around 150 minor security marks, tiny intentional defects used to identify fakes, but there were no modern color layers, holograms, or embedded security strips. The bank trusted tradition. The Nazis intended to exploit it. The first concept was astonishingly direct. Germany would simply print millions of fake pounds and dump them from aircraft over Britain. The expectation was that civilians would pick them up, spend them, deposit them, and inject huge quantities of false currency into the economy. This would undermine trust in British money and potentially trigger inflation or even hyperinflation. The technical challenge of reproducing Bank of England notes proved far harder than expected. The operation stalled and the leadership changed. Then came the man whose name would define the project. SS Major Bernhard took over. Under him, the entire operation became far more disciplined, professional, and effective. It was named Operation Bernhard. Krüger approached the task like an engineer. The objective was not good enough. It was perfection. The forged notes had to be so convincing that even trained bank professionals would accept them without hesitation. That required solving 5 enormous problems: discovering the secret security marks, engraving the Britannia vignette, forging authentic signatures, and mastering the printing and aging process. To do this, the SS assembled a forced labor team unlike any other inside the Nazi concentration camp system. At Sachsenhausen, near Berlin, around 140 prisoners with expertise in printing, engraving, typography, banking, accounting, and design were selected and placed in a special barrack. These men were not sent to immediate extermination. They were kept alive because they were useful. Their skills were more valuable to the Reich than their death. This was survival through technical necessity. They had better food, and they were spared the worst brutality. Their task was to save their own lives by helping fund the regime trying to destroy them. They identified the hidden flaws and deliberate printing imperfections used by the Bank of England as anti-counterfeiting measures. Despite the brilliance of the operation, the original plan to crash the British economy through mass circulation inside Britain never happened. Why? Because Germany lost control of the skies. The Luftwaffe failed to defeat the Royal Air Force during the Battle of Britain. Without air superiority, the idea of dropping millions of forged notes over Britain became unrealistic. The money bomb could not be delivered. This was the central reason Operation Bernhard failed in its original mission. So the strategy changed. The counterfeit pounds became a silent weapon. Rather than scatter fake pounds over London, the Nazis spent them quietly across Europe. They were used to pay intelligence agents, finance espionage operations, buy strategic materials, and fund covered diplomatic deals. One famous case involved the Turkish agent codenamed Cicero, who sold British diplomatic secrets to Germany and was paid partly in counterfeit Bernhard pounds. Another case involved the 1943 rescue of Benito Mussolini, where around 100,000 pounds from Operation Bernhard helped to secure critical intelligence connected to the Gran Sasso raid. Counterfeit money was funding raids, espionage, and procurement. At the Bank of England, clerks checked return notes against handwritten ledgers of serial numbers from previously withdrawn currency. One clerk noticed something remarkable. The note had already been paid. That meant it should not exist. It was a forgery. Although they had mastered paper and printing, they had failed to fully crack the bank's numbering algorithm and had to reuse serial numbers from genuine notes. Once the scale of the threat became clear, the Bank of England took drastic action. In April of 1943, it withdrew all notes above the £5 from circulation. £10, £20, and £50 white notes were effectively removed. This was an extraordinary step. It was an admission that Britain's own currency could no longer be trusted. Although Operation Bernhard failed to trigger the catastrophic inflation originally imagined, it still inflicted serious damage. First, it undermined trust. Second, the sheer scale was enormous. And third, Britain faced a credibility problem abroad. In wartime, when Britain depended on global purchasing power for food, oil, shipping, and weapons, that mattered enormously. This was not theoretical. It affected real wartime finance. As Germany collapsed in 1945, Operation Bernhard moved repeatedly. The prisoners were transferred from Sachsenhausen to Ebensee, Austria. The SS intended to continue production or possibly eliminate the witnesses. Fortunately, the prisoners survived. American forces liberated them on the 6th of May 1945. Meanwhile, the Nazis attempted to erase the evidence. Printing plates, machinery, and vast quantities of counterfeit notes were dumped into Lake Toplitz in Austria. The lake's depth and cold waters were expected to hide everything forever. But not forever. In 1959, divers recovered boxes of notes, and later reports suggested printing plates were also found. The Bank of England responded with a complete redesign. This did not happen overnight. The old notes disappeared first. Then, over the following decades, new banknotes were introduced. These were more colorful, more complex, printed on both sides, and much harder to counterfeit. In a very real sense, modern British banknote security was born from Nazi forgery. Hitler and the SS failed to destroy the pound, but he forced it to evolve. Operation Bernhard never achieved its original dream of destroying Britain through hyperinflation. No aircraft dropped mountains of forged pounds over London. No financial apocalypse erupted. But that should not obscure its significance. It was still one of the most sophisticated economic attacks in modern history. The Nazis called rockets and tanks their Wunderwaffe, but one of their most effective wonder weapons was a forged £5 note. Because in war, destroying confidence can be as powerful as destroying armies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. To make sure you don't miss my future work, subscribe to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.